Ancient technologies comments. Something that's been on my mind for a while, and I still keep seeing it over and over again, which is really annoying. The idea that Graham Hancock, for example, or people who are interested in lost ancient civilization like Atlantis, like the idea of Atlantis, keep wanting. There's people that keep wanting to argue the idea that oh, if the civilization was so advanced and the civilization was spread around the world, right? Why don't we find evidence of Atlantis outside of the so-called mythical location of Atlantis, right? Because supposedly Atlantis is was a structure was on a three three concentric circle location, right? So any place where there's three circles, one in one circle inside another, whatever location that looks like that is more likely Atlantis, you know, or at least that's where Atlantis would have been built on a location where that physical formation exists. So, example, in Africa, there's the Risha Eye of Sahara Desert, right? And that has three concentric circles, so that could be Atlantis, right? But anyway, the main point is the Graham points out, and a lot of us also point out, is that there was a civilization that was advanced, that was very knowledgeable in science. They were very similar to how we are right now. And then a big catastrophe happened where their civilization was destroyed. Their civilization was destroyed. So then they traveled the world to influence other civilizations, right? To keep other civilizations going. Most people understand this concept similar to the whole Superman thing, right? The Superman story, where his planet was destroyed, right? And he was the last son of Krypton, right? He was sent out to Earth, right? And then he started living here, and now we're influenced by Superman, right? So that's that type of concept. So Atlantis is very similar. It's the fact that hey, a civilization, right, got destroyed, and then they spread out to the rest of the world. What's ironic, we have a modern day version of the Atlantis situations, right, where a civilization existed, then it was destroyed, and then the people from that civilization spread out around the world and has some small influence outside of their specific locations. Rome. A lot of people forget Rome. Rome was an advanced civilization, just like Egypt, right? You know, Egypt is considered an advanced civilization for its time period, and it was destroyed, right? And then the influence of Egypt was spread. That's why you find like sarcophagus and pyramids and um, obelisks outside of Egypt. You don't see it just in Egypt; you see it outside of Egypt. So the point is the culture and the ideas of a specific location can spread, especially after a catastrophe. After you know you're conquered, which was the Egypt scenario. Rome was self destruction. It fell apart because it went from law and order to chaos. So basically, feminism happened, and boom, Rome fell. America's coming next, and that's the thing. We're going to experience this soon. America's going to fall, right? And then what's going to happen? A lot of what makes America great, right? We're going to travel the world and spread that Americanness around the world. And that's the irony there. So it's so ignorant to be like, oh, Atlantis. If it was a global civilization, why don't we find proof out, you know, period, around the world? It's like we do find evidence around the world of an advanced civilization that previously existed that influenced our current advanced civilization that currently exists. One, us existing is proof of that. Because how did we get here? How did we get it so advanced? We got advanced because of the knowledge of the past. The math that we know right now was created in the past. The languages we speak now was created in the past. The science that we use right now was created in the past. Everything that we think of right now that makes us so advanced all leads to the past. So it makes no sense to say, oh, there was no lost civilization that led to our civilizations now. So you're trying to make it seem like we magically appeared out of nowhere. That the concept, sorry, that the concept of creating a civilization and funding and founding it on science, religion, and stuff like that, right? Structure, law, all that just magically happened. Just one day, somebody decided, like, hey, I want to create a civilization. And then that happened. Now, granted, that can't be true. That some one person came up with the idea of creating a civilization, then everybody else agreed and started building something. But what I'm saying is that not somebody after humans existed for 100,000 of years, right? One person out of 100,000 years of human existence was like, hey, let's create a civilization. No. This idea of creating civilization had to have popped up multiple times throughout human history, which means as long as humans existed, the idea of creating a civilization has always been a thing, right? And it starts off with tribes, because everybody starts off by themselves, right? Like, I'm by myself, but I don't want to be by myself. I want to be with other people. Okay, let me find other people. Let me create a tribe. And then the tribe starts growing, getting bigger, especially if kids are being produced, right? Like, oh, this tribe's getting bigger. Okay, we need bigger space. We need, for this growing tribe. And then it turns into a civilization, right? Oh, it turns into a village, and then it turns into a civilization. But you get the point. It's like it eventually will happen in a short period of time or a long period of time. If it takes 100 years for it to happen, then it takes 100 years. If it takes 10 years for it to happen, it takes 10 years to happen. But to have this ignorant idea like, nah, it never happened in the past. Only now, in the 2000s, do we have an advanced civilization that ever existed on this planet. Like, bullshit. We've had civilizations existed that were advanced a long, long time ago. And the advanced thing is all about just, we created things that make life easy. So to think that ancient humans always lived life hard makes no sense. No, they were smart enough to figure out how to make their life easier in the past, and then they lived great lives. And the proof of that is the Great Pyramids, Great Wall of China, the aqueducts and Rome Colosseum, and the list goes on. Like, there's a whole bunch of proof left over on this planet of civilizations that are over 10,000 years ago, over 20,000 years old ago, proof that, like, yep, for over 20,000 years, for just as long as humans has existed, we've always created civilizations, where we've created cool shit. Because eventually we get bored and we're like, how does water work? How does air work? How does, because we're eventually going to figure this shit out. We're eventually going to figure out what air is, what water is, what viruses are, right? What the sun is, and the stars, and the list goes on. And like I said, all our current knowledge right now, everything that makes us quote unquote smart right now, was figured out over 20,000 years ago. Yet we're trying to act like it was discovered 20 years ago. Like, no, we ain't discovered this shit 20 years ago. As in, we didn't figure it out 20 years ago. We rediscovered it 20 years ago. Where it's like, oh, yeah, that's how you build the Great Pyramid. Of course, you use pulleys and you use a ramp system. Oh, of course. Of course, they been knew that when they built the pyramids, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. Now we're just realizing, oh, that's how they did it. Okay. Oh, I mean, that makes sense. Work smarter, not harder. So clearly the ancient Egyptians were smart enough to, figure it out. If it was the Egyptians, because there's a high probability the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids, specifically the Great Pyramid, but that's for a different conversation.